of the most articulate, amazing, inspiring human beings I have ever met. I am so grateful and so honored to be able to introduce Miss Talia Leman.
And I'm really truly inspired by the work of the Friendship Ambassadors Foundation and also by the Permanent Mission of Rwanda, so thank you very much. I'm also very inspired by what it means to be standing here within the walls of the UN. But most of all, I'm inspired by all of you, the thought leaders of today and the world leaders of tomorrow. Every person that's here today is here because you know that you matter, that your ideas matter, and that you can drive change. But how we all ended up here together in this same room on this very same day is much more than serendipitous. In fact, if I were being completely honest, my being here is in many ways an accident. And I'm beginning to find throughout my journey that some of the greatest things that happen to us often occur in this very same way, by accident. Or perhaps a better word is, by surprise. So I began working my way towards this realization at the age of 4 when I opened an upscale shoe store in my grandparents' home. So I took all 37 pairs of my grandmother's shoes and I placed one pair on the coffee table and then I put the other pair behind the bar where nobody could find it. So if my grandparents wanted to leave the house for any reason, a sale was imminent. And it wasn't long before I had ideas about how to expand my business, and that's when I started selling my grandparents back their own groceries. Yeah. But being 4 didn't deem me cute enough for what happened next, and that is, they shut me down. But not before I discovered my inner business child. So 6 years later, when Hurricane Katrina hit the Gulf Coast, I had a plan. I made the decision that with Halloween just around the corner, I was going to take advantage of that captive audience and trick-or-treat for coins instead of candy on Halloween, and then give that money that I raised to hurricane relief. I called my business TLC, which stood for Trick or Treat for the Levee Catastrophe, except for when it didn't. Sometimes it stood for Trick or Treat for Loose Change, or it stood for Trick or Treat for Large Currency or Loads of Cash. I took a very, very flexible approach to my branding. I also determined that I would be the CEO of this effort, a title that I took to mean Chief Executive Optimist. So dutiful to my title, I set an early goal of raising $1 million. And by all accounts, things were coming along quite nicely. I had a big trick-or-treat bag that I decorated, and then I chose a neighborhood where the houses were really close together. Then, my 6-year-old brother got wind of what I was up to, and he came up to me, clearly very upset, and said, "I'm opposed to what you're doing. I'd rather trick-or-treat for pirate relief." And those were his exact words, and we didn't know what to do with that, but we decided to make room for it anyway, and so we offered him the title too. And he became our official CON, Chief Operating Nemesis. And we put him on our website in his favorite Darth Vader costume, and quite frankly, he was thrilled. But then something happened that really changed my life forever. The Today Show happened to be visiting our little website and saw his photo and invited us onto their program, CEO versus CON. And one day later, I was fielding reports from kids all across the USA, tracking their donations on a map with pushpins. And then a week later, a local grocery chain offered to print 8.5 million trick-or-treat bags to be given out with my message on them in 223 stores and in 13 states. And our governor held a press conference, and then UNICEF invited me to do spots on CNN and NPR. However, when it came time to draw our efforts to a close, I knew we'd raised a lot of money, but it wasn't $1 million. It wasn't even $500,000. It was, in fact, $10 million. Kids across the USA ranked in their giving power with the top 5 US corporations. That's right up there with Walmart, Exxon, and Amoco. And having realized this, I knew that someone had to create something to harness that youth power for the other disasters that the world faces. We don't have to wait anymore for governments or institutions or corporations to take the lead. When we drive people to our causes, even from the armchairs of where we sit, we become the policymakers for the world. Another place where we can do greater and be greater than we know how is through making conscious choices. When Waleed talks about freedom, we think of freedom to speech. We think of freedom to believe. We think of freedom to vote. But freedom, I think, is ultimately about the power to choose. Freedom is a very complicated thing. I once thought that I was free because I live in a democracy of the people, by the people, for the people. But when I was in Israel, at the end of my sophomore year in high school, participating in a 4-day simulated army experience, I realized another kind of freedom. Regimented in mind and in body, up at dawn, marching, commanders telling me what to think and what to do. I became a machine, a vehicle, a cog. And I knew a freedom like I've never known before. I didn't need to think a thought. Or to feel a feeling. Sorry. Or to wonder. To decide, or to choose. And it was then that I realized the irony of living in a democracy. We who think we are free are not entirely free. We must choose what we do, what we say, who we are, and how we interact, and what we become. We are not a cog, or a machine, or a vehicle, for any purpose other than one that we imagine. I can't even see now. We are instead responsible. And there's a certain freedom in not having to choose. And there is an even greater freedom in choosing. In one kind of freedom, you get to be. And in the other form of freedom, you get to become. And nothing defines us more. Not the clothes we wear, not the subjects we study, and not the ringtones that we download. I remember once thumbing through a book by Gabe Locke and Malka Drucker about the Holocaust, and the book was called The Rescuers. And the book is a collection of photographs about righteous Jewish Gentiles, those who hid Jews during World War II at great personal risk to themselves and also to their families. My natural inclination was then to see these heroes, these people that were taking Jews in, as heroes, and then at the same moment to see the Nazis as villains. But as I read the stories, I realized that these righteous Jewish Gentiles did not see themselves as heroes. And in that same moment, I realized that the Nazis did not see themselves as villains. They were simply people, just like you and me, who were making choices. And I realized that when we allow ourselves to raise people above us as heroes, or lower them beneath us as villains, we disassociate ourselves from the real truth. And that is that nothing divides us but our choices. The difference between someone who shares a meal with a homeless beggar and someone who simply walks by as if wearing blinders is simply a choice. The difference between someone who smiles at the grocery bagger who clearly has different abilities and somebody who simply ignores them is a choice. We can all be heroes if we choose to be. We can all be indifferent if we choose to be. And we can all be villains if we choose to be. Your choices are what make you who you are. And with each one, you get a fresh chance. From our choices, even the seemingly inconsequential ones, great things can happen. So we have to make sure that our choices are conscious choices. Because sometimes we fall victim to making unconscious choices through passivity. When we do the same thing long enough, we begin to believe that that's the way it's supposed to be, and we don't pause to question that. So knowing that, Walid explained to me that the job of the revolutionaries was not to lead, but to wake up the leader in others. Because what was keeping them in repression was not the power of the government, it was the passivity of the people. So rebel against passivity. Remember that just because something is does not mean that that's the way it has to be, or does not mean that that's the way it could be or should be. And sometimes we make unconscious choices through our rebellion. We do this when authority figures draw lines in the sand, telling us what we must do and what we mustn't do. And our natural instinct is to do exactly the opposite. But no authority figure or controlling presence in our life should ever have the power to take away what you really meant to happen. So you have to rebel against that rebellion because it steals your truth. And my power to choose consciously means so much to me that I wear a necklace around my neck to remind me of that. And it's a message that I learned from a 92-year-old Holocaust survivor. He lived through the Warsaw Ghetto, fought in the Polish resistance, and was imprisoned by Hitler's army. An educated man from a once wealthy family, he immigrated to the United States, and he made his living cleaning houses. Now, unexpectedly, he is not bitter, and he is instead one of the kindest men that I know. And he's my grandfather. His name is Leman. Now, of course, I didn't know him during these tough times. I only knew of him as the man who never let us pay for anything at the dinner table. His credit card was always the first one out. So I decided to ask him one time, "Hey, Papa, why is it that you always insist on paying for absolutely everything?" And his answer surprised me. Probably because it was just so simple. He said to me, "Because I can." And that's what it says on my necklace, because I can. And I think that that's really the single best reason to choose anything or to do anything in life. Just because I can, because we all can. The final way of creating greatness beyond what we know is by believing. Believing is so powerful, in fact, that we can literally defy the laws of nature, making belief itself almost unbelievable. So we're going to dispel some myths about believing. Myth number 1. Belief only works when you believe. Not true. Someone believing in you, even without you knowing it, can help you to be successful and make you believe even. So Harvard researchers discovered that when they conducted a study, and it became known as the Pygmalion effect. And the researchers informed teachers in an elementary school in San Francisco that 20% of the students in their school have been identified as having unusual potential for intellectual growth, and that they would bloom academically within the year. Unbeknownst to the teachers, these students had been selected totally at random. And when these researchers tested these students 8 months later, they discovered that these randomly selected students raised their IQs anywhere from 10 to 30 points. Why? Simply because their teachers believed. Which means that we can believe others into being, and others can believe us into being. Myth number 2. Belief is strengthened by truth. Not true. People can believe the untrue true, and the true untrue. In another Harvard study that I'm sure most of you are familiar with, researchers looked at the reactions of patients that had been given sugar pills instead of real medications, and found that an average of 30 to 35% of these people who were given this sugar pill showed actual improvement in their medical condition, all because they just believed that this pill would work. But the mind-boggling part of this whole thing is that being in on this deception didn't stop the power of believing. So in a later study, researchers found patients and they told them that they were being given sugar pills. And they still responded exactly as they would have been given real medication. They didn't believe the doctors, making their belief resilient in the face of everything that was said to the contrary. Which means that we don't need truth to believe. We can create truth from believing. And finally, myth number 3, belief is trumped by survival instincts. Not true. Peter Kolot holds a Guinness Book World Record because he can hold his breath underwater for more than 19 minutes, while the rest of us can probably only last 2, unless something smells like really, really bad. And the reason that Peter can last longer is because he believes that his mind can master anything, even the body's natural inclination to gulp for air. So researchers have found that a trained brain can not only control instinct, but you can improve your body's own immune system, you can reduce stress, chronic pain, headaches, blood pressure, depression, and you can even make yourself smarter. So belief makes us superhuman. Our beliefs are the command and control center of our lives. What we believe matters more than anything else about us. So when people ask us what we want to be in life, we must believe bigger. We need to tell them, I want to be a member of a generation that cares more about our success as a planet than our success as individuals. I want to be someone who understands that every little problem solved is a big problem solved because we're all interconnected. I want to be someone who knows that the best reason for doing anything is simply because I can. I want to be someone who realizes that our everyday acts matter more than the big outcomes, because there are no big outcomes without them. And I want to be someone who knows that no matter what we do with our lives, that we have to do it with this. And I want to close now by answering the most common question that people ask me, and probably the most important question that people ask me. They ask me why I decided to call my organization Random Kid. And I tell them, quite simply, it's because I'm a random kid. I tell them it's because if I see myself as anything more than a random kid, then how will those I seek to empower see the potential that they have? I tell them it's because when we believe in the power that we each have, we have the greatest power of all. But what I don't tell them is this: that Random Kid's success did not happen because of my lofty goal or my grand business plan or even my ambitious title. Random Kid's success happened because, did you catch it? My little brother. A little brother who faces the challenges of a pervasive developmental disorder every day of his life. Random Kid's success happened because I made room for him. It was the one step that I took that seemed to have nothing to do with my success, and it became the very thing that made me successful. The final thought that I want to leave you with is this. Our greatest and most unimaginable triumphs occur when we make room for the plan that we didn't have. When we're free enough and brave enough to take a step sideways to a place where unexpected things might happen. Because, by definition, miracles can only appear in those unexpected places. By making room for the unexpected, for passions that don't make sense, for playfulness that has no purpose, for ideas that are not your own, for people who are not like you, for a path you didn't define, for a goal you didn't set, for a dream you didn't dream, and for a future that you didn't imagine, you can sometimes follow your heart to a larger destiny, be captured by a grander idea, dream that impossible dream, realize a power you never knew, choose a path that raises you higher, believe yourself into a new way of being, and create a future defined by surprises and marked with greatness you never thought possible. Thank you.